Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are setting the stage for a really visceral, high-stakes survival story. We're talking about ancient Judah on the absolute brink of destruction. And look, this isn't just your standard dry history lesson. It's a terrifying countdown. We've got clashing empires, massive cities burning to the ground, and the desperate, gritty realities of ancient warfare, all of it preserved in the very dirt of the Middle East.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To really wrap our heads around the last years of Judah, you have to feel the chilling dread that hung in the air back in the 8th century BC. I mean, just listen to these prophetic words from Isaiah. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, to capture booty and to seize plunder and to trample them down like mud in the streets. He didn't just see the Assyrian war machine as an army. He saw it as a divine rod of anger. They were literally an unstoppable force, just sweeping across the ancient Near East and crushing everything in their path.
And you can see that terrifying reality brilliantly illustrated in the depictions of the siege of Lachish from Sennacherib's palace. You see, Assyria didn't just use physical weapons. They were absolute masters of psychological warfare. For example, during the siege of Jerusalem, an Assyrian official named Rabshakeh completely bypassed the Judean king's officials. Instead, he stood right outside the city walls and shouted these terrifying threats directly to the regular people. And the kicker? He did it in fluent Hebrew so they would understand every single agonizing word.
So, what exactly was he threatening them with? Well, the tactics are, honestly, they're horrifying. The Assyrians basically ruled the ancient world through absolute, unthinkable fear. First, they'd play good cop, right? They'd promise you a peaceful relocation to some nice farms if your city just surrendered. But if you resisted, no way. They used impalement on poles right outside the city walls as a visible deterrent. They flayed captives alive. They even ripped open pregnant mothers. And if a nation even whispered about a revolt, the entire population would be systematically deported. It was ruled by sheer, unadulterated terror.
Now, when the terror tactics didn't force a surrender, that's when the macro warfare kicked in. The remnants of the Assyrian siege ramps at Lachish reveal a massive, organized engineering of death. The Assyrians built these incredibly huge ramps just so they could roll their heavy battering rams right up to the city walls. And the Judeans? They didn't just roll over and give up. They desperately scraped together material from inside the city to build counter-ramps, desperately trying to raise their own walls higher. It was a terrifying clash of ancient machinery, with people fighting for their very lives.
So, how does a kingdom even prepare when a threat like that is on the horizon? Well, Judean kings like Uzziah and Hezekiah, they had to get ready fast. And the evidence of their frantic preparation is actually found in this really key archaeological term, Lamelech. It literally translates to belonging to the king. Archaeologists have discovered over 2,000 of these specifically stamped storage jars, a massive find that was actually first published by the famous archaeologist Charles Warren.
Just imagine what these huge supply chains meant for a tiny nation bracing for an empire's invasion. These jars were all inscribed with one of 4 specific sites: Soho, Ziph, Hebron, and this kind of enigmatic site called Memshat. Now, scholars are actually still debating their exact purpose. Were they central taxation collection points? Were they royal food and grain stores being hoarded for a long, brutal siege? Or maybe they were products from the king's own royal vineyards. Whatever they were, they represent this massive, highly coordinated effort to stockpile resources before the storm hit.
Now, identifying and dating these kinds of artifacts is incredibly tricky. And that brings us to a really fascinating part of archaeology. You know, it's an evolving science, and it's totally driven by human interpretation, which means even the most brilliant minds can get it completely wrong. Enter William Foxwell Albright. He was basically the doyen of American biblical archaeology, an absolutely brilliant guy, but a simple misread on his part led to a massive, century-sized historical error.
Let's actually compare Albright's claim with the reality. Back in 1932, Albright found a seal impression at Tel Beit Mirsim. He misread the name on the seal as King Jehoiachin, and because of that one mistake, he dated the city's entire destruction layer to 597 BC, literally inventing a fictitious Babylonian campaign just to explain it. It wasn't until the 1950s that another archaeologist, Olga Tufnell, came along and corrected this. She proved, using Lachish III pottery, that the destruction actually happened a full century earlier, in 701 BC, during Hezekiah's reign and the Assyrian invasion. It's just a perfect reminder of how delicate historical truth really is.
All right, let's zoom in now. We're moving from these big macro geopolitics and shifting historical timelines down to the intimate, really grim realities of the besieged Judeans themselves. Take a look inside the 4-room House of Ahil. This was built right into the stepstone structure of the City of David in Jerusalem, and it gives us a really visceral picture of daily life. As the Babylonian siege closed in years later, around 586 BC, homes exactly like this one essentially became claustrophobic prisons for the people living in them.
It's amazing how archaeology turns even the most mundane objects into powerful storytelling devices. See, when Jerusalem was totally cut off, starvation set in fast. Inside houses like Ahil's, archaeologists actually found early indoor plumbing, a stone toilet. But it's what was underneath that's truly fascinating. By analyzing the cesspit below, scientists made microscopic discoveries of ancient sicknesses and parasites. I know it's a little gross, but it is an incredibly vivid scientific window into the intense suffering and rampant disease among the people trapped inside those walls.
And, in a really strange twist of fate, the very event that doomed these people is exactly what preserved their memory. When the Babylonians finally breached the walls in 586 BC, they completely burned Jerusalem to the ground. But those devastating fires ironically fired and hardened these little clay seal impressions, which we call buli. The papyrus documents that they were attached to turned to ash, but the clay hardened, just like pottery in a kiln, perfectly preserving the personal names and titles of those doomed Judeans for us to read today.
Now, what's really interesting about this next piece is how a poetic biblical phrase is actually grounded in literal physical reality. You've probably heard the phrase, "gathered to your fathers." Well, that actually described the literal practice of moving decayed family bones into a communal cave repository right underneath a burial bench. To see this in action, we have to look at archaeologist Gabriel Barkay's 1979 excavation at a site called Ketef Hinnom, located just outside the walls of ancient Jerusalem. Inside Cave 25 at that site, Barkay's team hit the absolute jackpot. They found an unrobbed repository with almost 1,000 artifacts inside. They had to excavate frantically, working round the clock just to protect the site from looters. And amidst all the dirt and the bones, they found these tiny, fragile silver objects. Barkay actually noted that they literally looked like small cigarette butts. But when the laboratories at Tel Aviv University carefully managed to unroll these super delicate silver plaques,
They found something truly awe-inspiring. Etched into the delicate silver in fine Paleo-Hebrew script were words that perfectly matched the priestly benediction from the Book of Numbers. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and grant you peace. It is highly likely that these little amulets were worn as talismans by someone living in Jerusalem while Solomon's temple was actually still standing.
So here is the absolutely crucial point to remember: the number 300. To really grasp the immense historical value of these tiny silver amulets, you just need to know that they predate the famous Dead Sea Scrolls by more than 300 years. There's no question about it. They are the absolute oldest fragments of biblical text ever discovered. They have completely reshaped our understanding of exactly when these texts were written down and revered by the ancient Israelites.
But here's the tragedy. While the people of Judah wore their silver amulets and prayed for peace, the geopolitics of the world were rapidly collapsing around them. The early 6th century BC was basically a chaotic countdown. The once mighty Assyrian Empire was crumbling to dust, and a brand new terror was rising up: Babylon. In 609 BC, the righteous King Josiah is killed at Megiddo by Egypt's Pharaoh Necho. By 605 BC, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar is aggressively campaigning in the Levant. In 597 BC, the initial deportations to Babylon begin. And finally, the fatal blow lands in 586 BC. And 586 BC brought absolute unmitigated devastation. When you look at the remains of a defensive tower in Jerusalem's Jewish quarter, it reveals the total destruction of that year. Right there in the ash of this destruction layer, archaeologists found arrowheads, and not just from one side, arrowheads belonging to both the desperate Judean defenders and the attacking Babylonians. It was a brutal, incredibly fierce close-quarters fight that ended with the total collapse of the city, the mass deportation of the surviving population, and the complete burning of Solomon's temple.
But did Solomon's temple entirely disappear? Look closely at this section of the Western Wall. Do you notice the difference here? On one side, you have these pristine, beautifully cut Herodian stones, sitting right next to highly weathered, deteriorating stones. There is this fascinating archaeological theory that when King Herod built his new enclosure walls centuries later, he actually found and reused massive stones from Solomon's original burned temple. Because those older stones had been structurally weakened by the intense Babylonian fires, they ended up weathering much faster over the centuries.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Even after the total destruction of Jerusalem and the mass exile, did the story of Judah truly end in the ashes? Well, archaeology tells us no, absolutely not. We know survivors remain behind in towns like Mitzpah,
slowly piecing life back together. From terrifying siege ramps to microscopic parasites, from royal jar stamps to tiny silver blessings, these artifacts don't just sit collecting dust in museum cases. They bring the incredible resilience of the past vividly to life. And honestly, it just makes you wonder, what else is still buried out there, waiting to rewrite history?